What's going on? Shane Serrano here with Radio Boardshop, and in this video I'm going to be comparing the Spark R&D versus the Karakoram Splitboard bindings, and hopefully this video will help you decide which of the two bindings you're going to get. They're both the top of the line Splitboard bindings. You can't go wrong with either, but I'm just going to break them down a little further in this video. If you're new to splitboarding, be sure to subscribe. Throughout this winter I'm going to be uploading a bunch of videos concerning splitboard gear, as well as tips and tricks on how to be a better splitboarder, and then also adventure videos where I go on splitboard missions. So you're not going to want to miss that. Don't forget to subscribe. Getting right into it, I'm going to start out with the Spark R&D splitboard bindings. Right here I have the Surge Pro in my hand. This is one of their lighter bindings, and I'm just going to break down the components and how this binding works and how it performs a little differently than the Karakoram binding. One thing to keep in mind is that everything I talk about with Spark bindings are going to be concerning their T1 and Pro bindings. That means there is no pin system in this. It's not a pin mounting system. It has this toe clip that slides onto pucks. So everything I mentioned about Spark bindings is going to be concerning this style of bindings from them. The way that this binding works is you have this little toe piece that flips up, and then this binding slides on top of the pucks of the splitboard. Toe locks down and you're ready to ride. To get into ski mode on this binding, all you have to do is flip the toe cap, and then these two tongs kind of slide sideways into the front toe ski mode hardware. You clip down and you're in ski mode. When you're going uphill in ski mode, you have this little back flip here, and you flip that up when you're going up. That gives you more angle in the back so you can get a further glide. When you're going downhill and you're going to go in snowboard mode, this little piece flips down, and that initiates your forward lean so you're ready to go and snowboard. The Karakoram binding I'm going to be showing you in this video is the Recon. All the clips that you're going to see is this Recon binding. Now, the way the Karakoram binding works is to get this onto your board, you have this little rubber piece on the heel. You pull that down, open the heel all the way, and what this does is it opens these pins right here, and it gets that open all the way. You set that onto the pucks of the board, pull the heel up, and it locks it onto those pucks that are on the board. To get into ski mode on the Karakoram binding, there is this little bar that runs across the toe that just sets into the toe piece hardware. You pull down and it grabs on and locks into place, and you're in ski mode. When you're skinning uphill, you're going to take this little plastic piece on the back and turn it horizontal. That gives you the angle in the back, so you have further glide and a longer glide. And then when you're going down into snowboard mode, you take that piece and flip it to initiate the forward lean. There is a smaller side and a larger side, which just gives you more forward lean or less forward lean on the small side. Now, the first big thing that people look at when they are comparing these two bindings is the weight. And the weight winner is going to go to the Sparks on this one. They're noticeably lighter right off the bat, and I think that's one of the reasons why some people tend to go towards Spark. Both binding companies make very light options, but even in the base models, the Spark is going to be the lighter option. In regards to how each of these bindings sits on the board and each puck system, I'm going to say that the winner of that category goes to Karakoram. With Sparks, because these just slide onto the pucks, it means they're just kind of sitting on top of the board. Whereas with the Karakoram, you have this pin system that really pulls the two pucks and the two skis together better. So this binding actually makes the two skis hold a little bit better together. That's going to make the splitboard underneath the Karakoram binding feel a little more like the solid snowboard that you might be used to. So you get a little bit better of a ride, in my opinion, with the Karakorams. As far as hardware goes between these two bindings, there is a little less hardware and moving parts on the Spark binding. Whenever you go in splitboarding, you're putting a lot of force and torque on all of your equipment, and so any binding, the hardware is going to get loose on all the components. But with the Spark, it's just these 1, 2, 3, 4 hardware that you really have to keep an eye on that they don't get loose. Whereas with the Karakoram, there are a lot more hardware pieces with this heel loop. There's some hardware underneath the base, and it's just a little more hardware pieces to have to keep an eye on that they are staying tight. So the winner of the hardware category is going to go to the Spark binding. Just a little less to keep an eye on and less moving parts. Now, talking comfortability, the difference you're going to get between the Spark and the Karakoram is that on the Spark bindings, you have a metal footbed underneath your boot. Whereas on the Karakorams, you have a foam pad underneath your foot. This is going to make the feel a little more comfortable where you're not just standing on a metal base plate or a metal footbed. That's just going to tend to keep the Karakorams riding a little more comfortable under your boot. Another thing that's going to set these two bindings apart is the base plate again. On the Spark, you have a pretty low profile sidewall of the binding. That kind of tends to give the feeling that your boot is rolling over the edge sometimes. On the Karakoram, you have full sidewalls on their binding, so your boot doesn't feel like it's rolling out of the binding at all. Karakoram does make different options that have lower sidewalls and higher sidewalls, and on the Free Ranger binding, they actually have a less dense material on the inside, which gives you a little bit more flex, which they're able to play with, which is kind of a cool thing. So sidewall, base plate of the binding category, winner is going to go to the Karakorams. As far as straps go, you're going to have a pretty comparable strap in both bindings. On the Spark, you're going to have a very minimal plastic molded ankle strap, which is pretty comparable to the Karakorams. I think the Karakorams might be a touch more comfortable, just with the design, and this one's a little softer flexing, but both are very comparable. I'm gonna have to give that a tie in the strap category for both of these bindings. Looking at the high backs on both of these bindings, you have a little more of a traditional high back on the Karakoram binding, where there's a little bit more of a minimal high back on the Spark. I think that helps to keep this binding a little lighter, but you just have a little less support behind your foot. They're very comparable, but I think the Karakoram high back is a touch better. It just feels more like a regular binding than the Spark does. Now for the mounting hardware of each of these bindings. Because the Spark binding is a puck mounting system, which does not come with the bindings, you are going to be paying an extra $90 for the puck system. So that is not included in the price of this binding. So when you're buying this binding, you can almost think like you're adding an extra almost $100 onto the price of whatever Spark bindings you're getting. Now with the Karakoram binding, when you buy the Splitboard specific bindings, they come with the plates that mount this board onto Splitboard. So you're not buying any additional plates or mounting systems. With that, it can be kind of tricky because it might seem that Sparks are the cheaper option, but when you throw that extra $100 price tag on there, they come out pretty similar when you're looking at bindings that are in the same class level. For Karakoram bindings that are not specifically Splitboard bindings, you can buy the split converter kit, which I believe is about $150, and turn that regular binding into a split binding. So there is that extra $150 charge if you are getting one of those models. The last thing I want to mention between these two bindings, and one big difference, is that the Karakoram binding is able to be mounted on both a Splitboard and a regular snowboard. So you can buy one binding to do it all. It's going to ride just like a regular binding on your regular snowboard, and then it's going to ride like a split binding on your Splitboard. And this was actually the determining factor for me when I was deciding between both Spark and Karakoram bindings. And the reason I went with the Karakoram binding is that when I go to travel, I can bring one pair of bindings for both my Splitboard and my regular board. I'm not adding extra weight for having Splitboard bindings, and I will save room. And so this is the actual binding that I went with, the Recon. This is their most aggressive binding, so they say, which means the stiffest high back. It also has stiffer sidewalls than some of the other bindings, and it was just a solid binding that I could get my hands on this year. So looking at the whole big picture, which binding is better, Spark R&D or Karakoram? It is a very close call, and they're both top of the line Splitboard bindings. I don't think I can say one is better than the other. There are a couple determining factors that, buyers really look for. Some people are all about weight, and if you're in that category, you're probably going to go with the Spark R&D bindings. But if you're looking for one binding to go on both a regular snowboard and a split board, you're definitely going to get the Karakoram binding because that's the only one that can do that. Also, if you're looking for a binding that's going to help make your split board feel more like your solid snowboard, the Karakoram is going to be the winner there. But like I said, there are both pros and cons to both. I wouldn't say one is way over the head of the other in terms of all categories and just a better binding. And also, since this is 2020-2021 winter season and we are in the midst of a global pandemic, the name of the game is get the binding whichever you can get your hands on. These are in crazy high demand this year, all splitboard parts and components. So if you have the choice of only Karakoram, but you're kind of set on Spark, go with what you can get so you can get out and start shredding and be out in the mountains. If you learned something new in this video, make sure to like it and subscribe. I'm going to be throwing out so much content on both split boards and regular snowboards concerning gear and just having fun in the mountains, going out and exploring, so you're not going to want to miss that. If you have any questions or comments on either of these bindings, please drop them below in the comments. I'll answer them as quickly as I can to help you decide which binding you're going to get. Thanks so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Peace.